I was betrayed by my family and wrongly accused, but I overcame and transformed my life. I never imagined I would one day feel so crushed by the very person who should have been my safe haven. That feeling of being alone, even surrounded by my own family, is unbearable. I remember looking out my bedroom window and thinking that maybe it would be easier to disappear because no one seemed to notice my effort or my worth. Everyone had a clear expectation of who I should be, and I never fit that mold. For years, I was treated as if my dreams were irrelevant, as if my life didn't matter. My every achievement was minimized, every step I took compared to my sister, Alicia, the perfect daughter, the star of the house, the priority of my parents, Jose and Samantha. I grew up hearing jokes disguised as advice and criticism disguised as concern. It was a constant cycle of devaluation, and over time, I began to believe that maybe I truly had no talent or value. But the truth is, no one grows up believing in themselves when the world that should support them chooses to ignore their existence. It was in this context of rejection and frustration that everything began to change abruptly and unexpectedly, with a blow that would leave me in shock and mark the beginning of my transformation. My name is Rodrigo. I'm 32 years old, and for years, I was my own family's plan B. I've always been a freelance programmer, passionate about technology and creation, but I never saw any recognition. My parents and sister always prioritized Alicia. She had money, attention, and constant praise, while I was invisible, treated as if my choices were mere distractions. Every criticism was laced with disdain. You should pursue a serious path, like your sister. This profession won't get you anywhere. I swallowed it all, trying to convince myself it didn't matter, but the anger, sadness, and frustration accumulated like a dark cloud that wouldn't disappear. At that moment, I was alone, without support, with no one to defend me or believe in me. It was like fighting an invisible war against ghosts, because no one saw my internal battles, no one recognized my efforts, and the weight of disappointment gnawed at me from within. The turning point came in an absurd and cruel way. My sister Alicia was embroiled in a public scandal that threatened to destroy her career as a lawyer. Instead of owning up to her mistakes, she accused me of sabotage, as if I had ruined her life out of envy or bad faith. I couldn't believe my ears when my mother, Samantha, called me and said, her voice cold, "Rodrigo, I didn't expect this from you." My father, Jose, didn't even bother to look me in the eye. It hit me with the force of a punch to the gut. I felt every fiber of my body tremble, my heart racing, my stomach churning. My own family was on her side, repeating the same old pattern, the golden daughter being defended while I was invisible and blamed. The world seemed to suddenly collapse, and the ground I believed to be solid gave way beneath my feet. The court process was terrifying. I felt powerless, alone against an absurd and unjust accusation. Each hearing was a test of emotional endurance, sweaty palms, shallow breath, watery eyes. I remember the first time I walked into the courtroom, feeling the stiff wood of the chair beneath me, the strong smell of paper and old wood, and the silence that weighed like lead. My parents were there, supporting my sister, looking at me as if I were the villain of the story, someone unworthy of any trust. Fear consumed me, but I knew that if I gave in to the pressure, my life would be destroyed completely. Every word her lawyer spoke felt like a direct blow to my chest, and I wanted to scream, cry, or run. But I stood firm, breathing deeply and trying to focus all my energy on proving my innocence. Those days, I reached my limit. I almost gave up. I cried alone in my room, staring at the ceiling, feeling a huge lump in my throat. My head throbbing with tension, my heart heavy, my body exhausted. Shame, anger, and frustration mixed together in a confusing way, as if I were trapped in a nightmare with no escape. Friends drifted away. Distant family members judged me without listening to my side of the story. I felt like no one believed me, and each night felt like a cruel repetition of the day before. The feeling of loneliness was overwhelming, and I wondered if I would ever be able to prove myself, if I would ever be recognized as someone worthy of respect and dignity. But something inside me still refused to give in, a spark of anger and pride that told me, if I fall, no one will pick me up. So get up and fight. In the days following the trial, my mind felt like a constant war. Every thought was a battle between anger, fear, and determination. I remembered all the times I'd tried to stand out, to show that I too had value, and how my efforts had always been diminished or ignored. My body reacted. Physically, sleepless nights, constant insomnia, trembling hands, a tightness in my chest that no one else seemed to feel. But at the same time, I began to realize that this situation, as dire as it was, could be a turning point. Every cruel comment, every disapproving look became silent fuel. I wanted to prove not only to my family, but to myself, that I could face this and emerge stronger. I began to write everything down, my strategies, my thoughts, my doubts, and my trials. It was like building an invisible wall, a shield against the world that seemed to be against me. I remember one particularly difficult night. I sat on the floor of my room, surrounded by papers, evidence, and notes about every step of the prosecution's case. My heart was racing, my breath was short, and a cold sweat was running down the back of my neck. I thought about giving up. I thought about how much easier it would be to disappear than to face my own family in court. But something inside me refused. I remembered every time I was called incapable, every time I tried something and no one believed me. It was there, sitting on the floor, almost without strength, that I decided I couldn't give up. I had to fight. I had to show that my existence had value, even if no one else saw it. Anger and pain turned into determination. The external battle was immense. Meetings with lawyers, gathering evidence, depositions, hearing after hearing. But the internal struggle was even more brutal. Every time someone in my family spoke or looked at me condescendingly, I felt a mixture of wanting to cry and wanting to explode. Sometimes I failed, lost my temper, and considered giving up. Other times, I pulled myself together, took a deep breath, and kept going. I learned during that time that strength is not the absence of fear, but the ability to continue despite it. And little by little, I realized that every detail I recorded, every piece of evidence I presented, was building my own narrative, my own story of resistance. It was a painful and lengthy process, but little by little, I began to feel small victories. With each session, with each convincing answer in court, my body relaxed a little more, and my mind strengthened. I felt like I was finally being heard, that someone was finally seeing me beyond Plan B. The feeling was strange, a mixture of relief and disbelief, because I wasn't used to feeling support, either from outside or from within. But it motivated me to continue, to study more, to plan each step precisely, to transform my pain into strategy, my frustration into action. I knew victory wouldn't come easily, but I also knew I couldn't fail. In the midst of this storm, I began to see something important. My life didn't need to be defined by my family's approval. I could, for the first time, separate my self-worth from their opinions. That gave me unprecedented clarity. The pain still existed, the resentment still simmered, but I realized that my worth didn't depend on their gaze. It was a moment of silent liberation, of recognizing that even though I was discredited, I had the tools and capabilities to rebuild myself and triumph. And it was with this feeling, mixed with fear and hope, that I decided that from then on, my life would be determined by me, not by the judgments and contempt I'd carried for years. After that clarity, I began to truly move forward. I began to see each challenge as an opportunity to prove, first to myself, that I could do I created a rigid routine, mornings dedicated to studying, afternoons to freelance projects, nights reviewing legal and administrative strategies for my own growth. I still felt fear, but it no longer stopped me. Now, it served as a warning, not a prison. I remember nights when my mind refused to shut down, thinking about every possible detail of the process, every client I needed to serve, every step of my career that still needed strengthening. My body ached with accumulated tension. My hands trembled with fatigue, but something new blossomed, a sense of control, however minimal, over my own life. I learned to appreciate every small achievement, every satisfied client. Every day, I managed to stand my ground. The battle in court continued, but my strategy evolved. I began recording everything: messages, emails, contracts, conversations. Every detail was like a piece of a puzzle that would irrefutably prove my innocence. The feeling of being able to organize it all, of finally having an arsenal of evidence in my favor, was almost addictive. At the same time, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: pride in myself, pride in being able to face a seemingly impossible situation, even without emotional or financial support. I began to realize that victory wasn't just about winning the case, but also about maintaining my dignity and sanity in the process. During this period, I made mistakes, of course. I lost my temper in court hearings, argued with lawyers, and blamed myself repeatedly for not having started sooner, for not having prepared sooner. But I realized that each mistake was a lesson. I learned to breathe before reacting, to filter emotions, and to use rationality as an ally. Each misstep became a learning experience, and this realization began to give me real confidence. Furthermore, my career began to benefit from this period. New clients, interested in hiring someone resilient, began to appear. I was still rebuilding my financial and professional life, but I felt that every effort was being rewarded, and this motivated me to continue. The day the verdict finally came down was surreal. I had won. My innocence was unequivocally recognized, and for the first time, I felt like all the suffering had a purpose. I entered the courtroom with my body tense, my heart racing, my breathing heavy, but I left with the feeling that I had finally regained something no one could take from me: my dignity. My parents and sister said nothing. I didn't need applause or recognition. The feeling of freedom, of being able to breathe without fear, was enough. Every tear I had shed in the previous months seemed to have been absorbed by something greater, and I finally felt I could move forward without looking back. From that moment on, my life began to change tangibly. I invested more time in my projects, expanded my client network, and began building my own company. Each small success was proof that I was capable of creating something solid, regardless of the opinions of those who despised me. There was still pain, memories, and scars from what I'd been through, but I realized that true victory isn't humiliating those who wronged you, but transforming your pain into fuel for growth. I learned that I didn't need family approval to be worthy, nor external applause to feel proud of myself. Each day that I woke up and continued building my life, I felt I was leaving behind a past that tried to define me, but never succeeded. With the case closed in my favor, I began to feel the true extent of my freedom. For the first time, I didn't have to prove anything to anyone, not even my family or my sister. Each signed contract, each satisfied client, each completed project was a small victory that bolstered my confidence. I began to realize that all the suffering I'd experienced had given me skills no one else had taught me: resilience, patience, focus, and the courage to face extreme adversity. My body still bore the marks of tension and sleepless nights, but my mind was sharper than ever. A sense of financial and emotional autonomy began to replace the void left by family rejection. I was finally in control of my own life. While I was rebuilding my career, my sister was in decline. Alicia, once synonymous with success and prestige, began to see her reputation crumble. Her professional license was suspended, her clients disappeared, and unlike me, there was no one to support her. I watched through news reports, calls from old contacts, and social media as everything she'd built with effort and privilege began to crumble. And it wasn't a sudden decline. It was gradual, cruel, and irrefutable. I felt a mixture of relief, justice, and sadness. Relief at finally being out of her shadow, justice at recognizing that the world doesn't forever protect those who make mistakes, and sadness because, in a way, I knew that situation could have been different if we'd had empathy and honesty within the family. My relationship with my parents changed completely. They, who for years had ignored my efforts and blindly supported my sister, knocked on my door asking for financial help to support the daughter they had always despised. It was a surreal moment. My body trembled, my heart raced, and my mind raced, trying to process it all. For the first time, I felt a sense of real power, not out of revenge, but out of autonomy. I showed them my journey, my achievements, my growing company, loyal clients, and successful projects. And for the first time, I said no. The door closed, but it wasn't an act of anger. It was an act of protection, of self-respect. The feeling of symbolically closing that door was more powerful than any court victory. I finally felt free from expectations, contempt, and comparisons. My body relaxed from a tension I hadn't even known I was carrying, and my mind found clarity. I could breathe without guilt or fear. Life began to make sense again. Every step I took, every investment I made in my career, every project I delivered with excellence showed me that my worth didn't depend on anyone else. And that emotional freedom opened the door for me to build healthier relationships, connecting with people who valued who I truly am, not who my family wanted me to be. Today, looking back, I realize that all the pain I went through was not in vain. Every tear, every sleepless night, every feeling of inadequacy prepared me for something greater. I've become a more resilient, focused, and self-assured person. My company thrives, my career is respected, and most importantly, I respect myself. I've learned that the approval of others is fleeting and irrelevant compared to the strength we can find within ourselves. True victory is transforming pain into action, injustice into learning, contempt into motivation. I still carry scars, memories that make me shudder, but today they serve as a reminder. We are capable of overcoming, growing, and building a dignified life, even when no one believes in us. Over time, I realized that my life was no longer defined by the past, by the mistakes of others, or by the unfair expectations of my family. I had built a space of my own, a safe environment where my decisions were valued and my achievements were recognized. My company grew, my projects prospered, and my name began to be respected in the market. But more importantly, I became the protagonist of my own story. Each satisfied client, each contract closed, each challenge overcome was concrete proof of my competence, vision, and courage. I felt my body gradually releasing the tension accumulated over years of rejection, as if each professional victory also released pieces of my soul, trapped in cycles of family pain. Alicia's decline continued, silent and inevitable. Her arrogance and professional neglect left her isolated, and all the privileges that once seemed indestructible crumbled. I watched from afar, without cruel joy, only with the clear knowledge that justice somehow existed in the world. While my life progressed, with opportunities arising and new people recognizing my worth, she faced closed doors, missed opportunities, and the humiliation of realizing that no one was willing to take a chance on her. It was ironic, but also liberating. I didn't need to fight her. My focus was solely on myself, and this became the key to my emotional peace. One of the most memorable moments was when my parents knocked on my door asking for financial help to support Alicia. My body trembled, my heart raced, and the memory of years of contempt came flooding back. For the first time, I had a real chance to decide, and I decided not to give in. I showed them my journey, explained my independence, and literally closed the door. It was a symbolic and liberating act. For the first time, I felt that no one could manipulate or diminish me anymore. My life was in my hands, and I could move on without carrying the guilt or the obligation to repair injustices that weren't my fault. Today, when I reflect on everything that happened, I realize how much every pain, every tear, and every sleepless night prepared me for the freedom I have now. I learned that our strength doesn't come from external applause or family recognition, but from the ability to rise up even when the whole world looks at us with suspicion. I still deal with old memories and wounds, but they don't define me. They simply remind me that we are capable of transforming pain into learning, contempt into motivation, and that true victory isn't humiliating those who hurt you, but building a dignified and respectable life, regardless of the approval of others. If I could speak to anyone who feels discredited, rejected, or invisible, I would say, you don't need anyone's approval to be valuable. Believe in your ability, fight for your dreams, even when the world seems to conspire against you. I'm Rodrigo, and my life is proof that it's possible to transform pain into victory, that it's possible to rebuild yourself, grow, and earn respect, even when everything around you seems to say you can't. The path is arduous, full of falls, fear, and loneliness, but it exists, and when you rise up, you realize that emotional freedom and true success lie precisely in not depending on anyone to feel worthy. Today, I live, breathe, and grow with pride in what I've built. And I know my story can inspire others to believe it's possible to succeed, even after everything.